Sandy Murphy-Rick Tabish are overturned. All that and more coming up next on Nevada Week in Review.
Welcome to Nevada Week in Review, where newsmakers and journalists discuss the issues and examine the stories behind the headlines. And now here is your host, Mitch Fox.
Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the media panel. First off, freelance journalist Steve Freese, Emily Richmond with the Las Vegas Sun, Glen Meek with News 3, and John L. Smith with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. We have a lot to take up tonight, but first, take a look at this background report.
Well, I was very surprised at the federal ruling, but I think it allows us a couple of other opportunities for an appeal at the federal level and maybe also a petition then at the state level. Don't expect to have us give this up.
Republican State Senator Sandra Tiffany says Nevada is in the middle of a constitutional crisis as well as a budget battle. She says this is an issue that needed federal intervention.
The two-thirds vote is very important because the people voted twice at a 70% level, and they think it's important to be very judicious if you're going to be raising taxes.
But federal judges ruled that according to a previous U.S. Supreme Court ruling, a United States District Court has no authority to review final judgments of a state court in judicial proceedings. Review of such judgments may be had only in this court.
It's not the state court's action that is the basis of our appeal. It is the Assembly's action, and the Assembly has an independent obligation to comply with the provisions of the Nevada Constitution. It's their action in violation of that Constitution that is the basis of this appeal.
John Eastman, the plaintiff's attorney, says even though the Assembly followed the state Supreme Court's orders, they violated the Nevada Constitution by passing a tax plan with only a simple majority. That's the issue Eastman will soon take to the Ninth Circuit. He says any appeal with the U.S. Supreme Court would come later down the road.
Okay, federal court makes its decision, says it doesn't have jurisdiction because the state Supreme Court should decide matters involving the Constitution. Didn't surprise that many people, but do you think it really will get the process going? What do you think?
Well, I've been wrong every day of the session, so I will continue to go out on a limb and saw it right off by saying no, it's not going to make any difference. This is going to have to be resolved at some point, at some time in Carson City. People are going to have to settle whatever differences they have for this round and just get it over with and go home. So I don't think it's going to matter that much. Clearly, the Republican 15 are not going to give up. They're going to appeal. But in the meantime, they're still going to have to do business in Carson City, no matter how little they're getting done.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the outcome of the budget crisis currently. And in fact, the legislators say that they're going to seek the two-thirds majority anyway, because their fear is if they get less than two-thirds on a tax increase, they'll just get sued anyway, and the taxes will be in litigation later. So they're going to stick to two-thirds no matter what, I think, unless they absolutely have no choice. But otherwise, for the court process, there's still a long road to go.
Apparently, at one point, any mention of a gross receipts tax or a payroll tax or even a bank tax was the talk of the town, but now it's kind of receded, and now it's kind of percolating up again. If we have that graphic, I want to pull that up if it's ready, and this is something that the Democrats have been circulating, showing the difference in business taxes that, there it is right there. Home Depot, this is something that, again, the Democrats in conjunction with, as I understand it, State Taxation Department released, showing the business taxes that Home Depot pays in Nevada total $2.5 million. In Arizona, Home Depot pays $212 million, California $269 million, Idaho $231 million, Oregon, and then Utah $200 and $152 million. And I think we have one other example. I had several examples. Target stores, $25 million in Nevada, $115 million in Arizona, $146 million in California, $125 million in Idaho, and $125 million in New Mexico. Nonetheless, despite this release of information, perhaps this information should have come out sooner, it appears as though that any appetite for a broad-based business tax is dead. Would you agree?
Well, yeah, it's one of those things that continues to come back to life. It's been buried and been dug up on a number of occasions. I think this last go-around, they were more serious about it being dead. strictly because I think they saw, when you start to see articles in national newspapers coming out that are completely mortifying to the state legislature, I think, the warring factions have to be looking at each other and going, we'll fight about this later. Let's get this over with before our careers are over.
You've been rather pointed in your observations regarding the regular session, the first special session, the second special session. How do you think this group is going to be judged come election time?
I think there'll be a faction of folks who think that the Republican 15 are sent from heaven as the great tax protesters. And I think there'll be a lot of folks, especially when they start to absorb the hits from school delays and things like that, who are going to be real mad at them. So, they're not going to get a free pass. The people who are going to get tattooed are a lot of the folks who were very quick to jump on the tax increases. I don't think this is much of a legacy for Governor Gwen. It's a complete failure, frankly. It's a failure of communications and politics. On the floor, grinding the sausage. Right, when they should have been compromising, they were very busy with other issues. They were very busy holding the line and threatening each other and puffing out their chests, and now they're paying for it. And frankly, I think they should.
Okay, there's a recall effort going to be waged against actually recalling the governor, in addition to 6 Supreme Court justices. And, we got a background report. Take a look at this.
This rally begins an official effort to recall 6 of the 7 justices in our state's Supreme Court. It's being led by about 40 or so groups that have combined to form Nevadans for Sound Government. They say the state's high court has overstepped its boundaries, and now all but 1 justice now needs to go because of it. Last week, the courts ruled that a record tax increase could pass without a 2/3 majority vote. In fact, it's made the high court a lightning rod for criticism, and now this effort to recall 6 of them.
I am angry about it. I'm angry that they would trash our rights. 71% of the people in Nevada voted for this. 71%, and they just said, oh, well, that doesn't matter. We're just going to do what we want.
The point is that without law and order, we have anarchy, and we're certainly not going to allow a small number of people that serve in the Supreme Court to start writing laws. That's why we have 3 forms of government.
Okay, they also want to launch petitions that would ban public employees from serving as legislators. I think they want to ban gaming companies from contributing to campaigns. Mr. Harrison, this report also singled out special interest groups, which would refer to public employees and representatives of the gaming industry. Your take? Oh, go for it.
I'm not sure who that leaves left if you take all those people out, considering, 25% of Clark County is employed in the hospitality or gaming industry. It's the largest single employer outside of the school district. So then I'm not sure who you're going to ask to do the voting and to be paying those taxes.
It's really just sort of a silly sideshow. Half these things aren't going to make it to the ballot. Those that are, it'll probably be a very long ballot next time, one way or the other. And maybe that'll keep some people from voting in general to just stay home.
I think there's another thing that's going on here behind the scenes. Just as recall efforts fail, they generate a lot of negative press for incumbents, and that's what's going on here. They're going to get story after story after story about their cause and their battle to collect enough signatures to oust Supreme Court justices. They're not going to oust them. They might those justices might draw some opponents in the future, and it's certainly opposing people who've opposed this group of libertarians and IAP members and Hoosits. They're going to have some issues too. So I think it's more of a propaganda move than something that'll actually, bear fruit in a real recall.
Yeah, I read in an RG article, I believe it was Jason Geddes, who's a Republican from Reno, one of the conservative Republicans from Reno, but he actually is employed by UNR. And he doesn't really take kindly to a ban of public employees being in the state legislature. So there may be some Republicans that will not go along with this.
No, in fact, actually, Lynn Hetrick himself told me yesterday that he doesn't support a recall either. I think that in general it sort of looks like sour grapes. It looks like just a bad attitude in general, and this idea of sort of recalling and doing over elections, it rubs people almost as wrong as rewriting the Constitution by the Supreme Court justices.
All right, let's get an assessment of where we are in terms of the public schools. We have a background report on that as well. Take a look at this.
Before the federal court ruled a simple majority can pass a tax hike in the legislature, school district leaders gathered to deliver some sobering news.
Without an approved budget and without an approved revenue source to fund the budget, the Board of School Trustees is forced to consider the limited options available to us.
If lawmakers don't reach an agreement before next Thursday's school board meeting, trustees will consider 3 options to deal with the district's budget crisis, including delaying the start of the school year, laying off some district employees, or eliminating more programs.
I don't know if angry is even the right word to describe what's going on here. It's a circus. It makes the state look like a joke.
The district also made official the reassignment of more than 400 specialty teachers to regular classrooms.
Never in my 30-plus years as an educator in 3 states have I witnessed such blatant disregard for children's constitutional right to a quality education.
The school district says it will run out of money by the end of August if education funding isn't approved, a thought that frightens parents like Terry Witzel.
I'm sick. I'm sick. Absolutely sick. These teachers' lives are going to be thrown into total turmoil. All of the district is going to be thrown into turmoil, and it's going to ricochet. It's going to hit everybody. And people just don't seem to understand that, yeah, this is happening to you.
30 minutes after the news conference, district leaders received the news that the way had been cleared for a simple majority to pass a tax hike. But that didn't do a lot to change the mood at district headquarters.
Now we thought we had that when the Supreme Court came down and told them to go ahead. It's still in the hands of the legislature.
Until we see in black and white that they have agreed and that they have passed a budget with the taxes to support it, we're still going to be in our crisis mode.
Okay, crisis mode. We've heard crisis mode from various quarters for the past few months. How bad is it?
There's no question that it's escalated to a point that we haven't seen before in terms of tension, in terms of anticipation of the worst case scenario. Since about May, the school district has been talking about these prospective cuts as it's a very serious and possible thing. They've been having community meetings, town halls, surveys, asking people what it is they wanted to see put on the short list. They then compiled that short list to much public outcry of about $110 million in cuts, which included everything from middle school sports to band to music to the specialists that we've seen reassigned to the classrooms. They then put all of those things on what they called the back burner, waiting for, well, today. Today's the day they actually took that list off the back burner, put it on the top of the agenda for next Thursday's board meeting, and that's when some of those things really could become a reality.
So the literacy specialists, the ECSs, the educational computing strategists, the gifted and talented teachers, they're gone.
The way they're looking at it now is the original plan was if they had a budget by July 1st, they would return all of those people to their original assignments. As you know, Clark County Superintendent Carlos Garcia suspended hiring of new teachers because he said we can't hire teachers unless we know there's money in the bank to pay their salaries. That left the district with 1,000 vacancies for the school year starting August 25th. To cut that number nearly in half, we reassigned those specialists. Now what they're saying is this: if they get a budget anytime soon, they'll start putting those specialists back one by one as a teacher is found for each of the schools to take over those regular classroom assignments. But that can only go on so long. With the school year starting, they're not going to want to yank teachers out of a classroom, put someone new in. They do a little bit of that after count day every year in September, but they don't want to do that on a major scale. It's disruptive to the school, it's disruptive to the children, and it's difficult for the teachers to adjust.
When do they actually run out of money? If there's no action by the state legislature, up until what point can they meet payroll?
They're going to make their August 5th payroll with the money they have. After that, when all those checks are cashed by August 8th, the coffers will be scraped clean. What they then are going to do, and they're asking the school board for permission to do this, is to borrow $40 million from their own reserve accounts. Much of this money, about $25 million, I'm told, will come from their risk management reserve account. That's money the district has to have on hand to cover things like worker compensation claims or to settle lawsuits. That's money they are required to have in there. So they may have to get some kind of a dispensation from the Department of Taxation to say, look, we need to spend this money otherwise.
Okay, Nye County has already said, we're not starting on time.
That's right.
We're waiting 2 weeks.
They did.
Now, why is that?
Well, Rob Roberts, superintendent of Nye County, and he's a retired Army lieutenant colonel, used this analogy this morning when I spoke with him. He said, look, we're asking our teachers to come in on 2 weeks' notice and get school started. The legislature is asking us to wait until the very last minute to buy our textbooks. You can't turn an aircraft carrier around in a parking lot. And while Nye County is a much smaller aircraft carrier than Clark County, you can only imagine what kind of problems they're having here.
Okay, one last issue, and this is all tied in together, and this has to do with Congressman Jim Gibbons, who you may know authored that 2/3 tax majority requirement. There's some speculation that he has capitalized on this. He's actually had some news conferences in the state of Nevada, and he's setting himself up for a possible run with, or run against, Senator Harry Reid. Is that right?
Yeah. It's not clear whether Jim Gibbons is actually running yet or not, although it seems pretty likely since he was out there on the courthouse steps on Saturday proclaiming how outraged he was by the Supreme Court decision. He is personally attached to that tenet of the Supreme Court, of the Constitution. So the confidence he might have been missing to go after Reid and know he's going to have the money, know that the right wing is going to be energized, is now there for him. The only thing he has to figure out now is whether his wife wants him to run or not.
Now, how nervous is Harry Reid? He has not really won an election by a wide margin, either in some time or if at all. The last election against currently Senator John Ensign was a squeaker, 400 some odd votes.
Well, I don't think Harry Reid sweats very much, but he definitely doesn't sleep very much either. He's the kind of guy who will always be planning to get the extra vote where it's available. He won by fewer than 500 votes the last time. He's accustomed to not getting votes in the rurals. You know, the idea that, this will kill him in the cow counties. He's dead in the cow counties. You know, the fact is the winner of that race will be the one who wins Southern Nevada and Washoe, and then picks up a handful of votes here and there. So I mean, clearly we're going to see more pork roll into Nevada in the next year than, and which is great, because I'm all for pork if it's coming to Nevada.
There's some indication that the public relations specialist Sig Rogich, who has worked for 2 Bush administrations, I believe, in some capacities, and been involved in several Republican campaigns, there was some indication that he was going to be assisting Senator Reid in his re-election campaign, which set up a firestorm controversy.
Well, Wall Street Journal has reported that, and Roll Call has reported that. Sig Rogich has a long-time friendship with Senator Reid. The speculation that got a little bit askew, according to Pete Ernott, the governor's inside man, is that one of the Wall Street Journal also floated that Ernott was considering working with Harry Reid, and Ernott really went through the roof saying, "Oh no, I'm working for President Bush's re-election only."
So if Congressman Gibbons should enter that race, I'm assuming that is the race to watch.
Oh, absolutely.
For 2004.
Sure.
Yeah, that one, and Jerry Springer's run for Senate. Going to be kind of fun, too.
I forgot that one, actually. Yeah. Let's go on to the next one, and that has to do with Mr. Tabish and Ms. Murphy. Take a look at this.
First time I saw you. Yeah, yes it is. How's it going? Good.
It was a good day for Rick Tabish, who learned the state Supreme Court has granted him a new trial on a couple of technicalities.
I've waited for this for a long time, and the fact that I'm not a convicted murderer as of today it means everything to me and my family.
Tabish says things will be different in Binion murder trial 2. For one thing, he plans to take the witness stand this time to explain his side of the story.
I wanted to be straightforward, Glenn. I didn't like all this hide this, and I felt I got convicted on guilt by omission. I think if I had to take a few shots in the chin, great. Take them, but at least let the jury know who I am as a person, what I did for a living, and not let them wonder.
If the prosecution were to come back now, afraid to roll the dice twice, for example, and offer you a deal, would you take it?
No way. I'll go do 25 more years in here. They could come to me and say, we're going to go after you with the death sentence. I'm innocent.
But just because the Supreme Court has given Tabish a new murder trial, it doesn't mean he'll be out of prison while awaiting his day in court.
He still has charges that he's been convicted of, and those were not reversed by the court, so he will have to complete those sentences before he'd be released, either on parole or on discharge.
Okay, sum it up. What exactly did the state Supreme Court say about those trials?
Well, essentially it was all procedural, and I thought that was kind of interesting because I think the defense was really looking to have some of these evidentiary issues decided. They were talking about, for example, the prosecution saying, well, we think it might have been overdose, but if it was an overdose, then he was burked, he was suffocated when the overdose, the poisoning didn't work. So it was all on 2 essential procedural matters. One, that they said help me out here, John. What were the 2 procedural matters?
Two of the charges, two of the convictions that were tossed. One of them had to do with a statement made, a hearsay statement made by Attorney James Brown, who remembered that, although he didn't report this immediately to the police, he remembered that Ted had told him that if he died, Sandy was involved somehow. And the other had to do with Leo Casey, a man who was with a rather colorful history in his own right, who was extorted and was allowed to describe very, very graphically what supposedly took place while he was being beaten, et cetera, et cetera.
The Supreme Court essentially said you have to sever those charges, the extortion charges, separate, because they tended to spill over onto the murder defendants, especially Sandy Murphy, who had nothing to do with the extortion out at the Sand Pit.
And that was something that was argued very early on by the defense attorneys. They made a point of it. They didn't stress it afterward, but they did make that point very early.
How much of the blame should Judge Bonaventure shoulder in this? Was there any indications from the ruling that he could have handled things a little differently in his courtroom?
Well, I don't know about handling things different in his courtroom, but I think essentially the Supreme Court decision lays it all on Bonaventure, saying that he should have granted him a severance when they made that motion, and also that he should have ordered a special jury instruction to say, look, this is not Ted Binion testifying from beyond the grave, this is just a guy saying what Binion said, so that you can look at his state of mind. But I think there's also probably, I don't know if you want to call it culpability, but there's also probably some responsibility at the district attorney's level. I mean, I think they could have probably said, you know what, let's go ahead and sever these extortion charges out. I don't know if there was any consideration of that, or whether that was something that was, I had heard that there might have been some dissension within some of the ranks that maybe we should, just so we don't have to worry about that. Let's get those separate, and let's concentrate on the murder case and don't have to worry about this as an appellate issue. But I don't know if that was the case or not. But obviously, the way the Supreme Court laid it down, it was pretty much on Judge Bonaventure's shoulders.
Now, the current district attorney was the one that actually prosecuted that case.
Right.
Does Mr. Roger have a tough road ahead? Difficult task?
You know, the last poll that I saw, 7 out of 10 Southern Nevadans think they're still guilty. So charges tossed or not, the average guy on the street appears to side with the district attorney. So it'll be an interesting jury pool to draw from.
Yeah, so what is he going to do? Is he going to assemble the same case? Is it going to be basically a facsimile of what transpired before? Anything new will surface?
I think the prosecution's case pretty much has to be the same case. I mean, they've already essentially put out the blueprint and said this is what our theory of the case is. They can't really change it midstream right now. They might have some additional facts and evidence that they've collected over that period of time. I think the real change that you'll see is with the defense. You know, obviously Tabish has said, look, I'm going to take the witness stand this time because there were a lot of things there that I really felt needed to be explained, and there was no one from our side really explaining those. And from his position, he said that the attorneys were simply saying, look, there's reasonable doubt about all this medical evidence. You got one medical guy who says he was burked. You got one that says he was overdosed. You got one that says that, it was an accident. Another says it was suicide. So they thought there was enough reasonable doubt there to kind of float that through, and obviously that wasn't the case. I think there was this mountain of circumstantial evidence that was out there that really helped bury him. But,
given Rick Tabish's history of testimony and his inability to keep his mouth shut while he had an opportunity to, I'm sure the prosecution would love to get him on the witness stand.
It would be interesting to see with the cross-examination. I think you're absolutely right, because that was a couple of things that he was saying when we talked to him the other day. Is that we mentioned, hey, look, this relationship you had with Sandy Murphy is going to come out. I mean, it's got to be. It's part of the motive. It's one of the oldest motives in the world for a murder. And he was saying, well, no, I want to leave that in Beverly Hills. Well, he may want to leave it in Beverly Hills, but not the prosecution.
Bring it home.
When are we going to hear from Sandy Murphy?
I'm astonished that of all the people, she's the one that's keeping her mouth shut. I mean, this is a woman who did do talking before Rick Tabish did, at least on, national media, and then also, was quite colorful with her painting of her monitoring device on her ankle to match her clothes. I'm really kind of surprised they've been able to keep her quiet, but I think eventually we're going to see that.
Okay, let's go into one issue real quick, and that has to do with Homeland Security funds. Clark County got $7.7 million in federal funds to fight terrorism. Just tell them you're busy, Steve, okay? The state panel voted unanimously to award Southern Nevada the amount. In the second go-round, apparently in the first go-round, the sheriff was a little upset because there was a lot of belief that we had gotten shortchanged. Why the shift? Why? Real quickly, why the short change in the beginning, and why
the squeaky wheel? I think the sheriff made it very clear. So you've got 70% of the population. You've got all the tourists. It doesn't need to go to Tonopah. It needs to come to Southern Nevada.
And what is he going to use it for? What did he need it for?
First responder equipment and communications improvements. There'll be a lot of task force issues that'll soak up a lot of money, and of course overtime.
Okay, and I guess there's other rounds, and there'll be more money, and they'll be able to reapply, and it's all based on a formula devised by the state panel, right?
Right, and of course, with input from the politicians who need to say that they got the money for Nevada.
Okay, we're going to cut this a little short so Steve can get that call returned. I want to thank you for being on this edition of Nevada Weekend Review, even though you're so popular. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Yeah.
Opinions expressed on Nevada Weekend Review do not necessarily reflect the views of KLVX Channel 10, its staff, management, or licensee. The opinions and/or perceptions expressed are solely those of the individual participants.